Ramaphosa has declared a national state of disaster to respond to the electricity crisis in the country. The president says that the state of disaster will enable government to provide practical measures that are needed to support businesses. The country is currently facing grueling rolling blackouts. The Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Minister, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, has gazetted the declaration of the state of disaster. President Ramaphosa says that the state of disaster will begin with immediate effect.
We are therefore declaring a national state of disaster to respond to the electricity crisis and its effect. The Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs has just gazetted the declaration of the state of disaster, which will begin with immediate effect. Now, what will the state of disaster enable us to do? It will enable us to provide practical measures that we need to take to support businesses. A number of businesses, for instance, in food production, storage, retail supply chains, including for the rollout of generators and solar panels and uninterrupted power supply. Where technically possible, it will also enable us to exempt critical infrastructure such as hospitals and water treatment plants from load shedding. And it will enable us to accelerate energy projects and limit regulatory requirements while maintaining rigorous environmental protection as well as procurement principles and technical standards. Now, the Auditor General will be brought in to ensure continuous monitoring of expenditure in order to guard against any abuses of funds needed to attend to this disaster.
Well, for some reaction on this and other issues that came out in the speech, we're now joined by Build One South Africa party leader, Mmusi Maimane. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. What is your reaction to the President's announcement of a national state of disaster to address the energy crisis?
Good evening, and good evening to fellow South Africans. A declaration of a state of disaster does not automatically solve your problems. It simply just allows you to sidestep some of your own processes. The great difficulty we face here today was the President conceded that this wasn't a new plan. It was something that he tabled a while ago. I would have in many ways preferred for the President to say we are with immediate effect procuring nuclear or this type of technology to augment energy. When you do that, it means that then you can use the state of disaster in a transparent, accountable manner. I think all of us as South Africans have seen this before. We fear corruption. And furthermore, to then say you've got a minister in the presidency to deal with electricity tells me that you've lost confidence in your own cabinet, and which ultimately means that we will be financing multiple interventions as a taxpayer. And therefore, I would urge that rather than simply just making a state of disaster, the government must be held accountable to the plans it delivers. And the only way we'll know for sure is whether in a few months' time we either have load shedding or we've finished load shedding.
The President says, though, to have somebody focused on the electricity issue will make it more able to confront the energy challenges.
I have to ask an honest question. What have the ministers of energy been doing then? We've had load shedding now for 14 going on 15 years. What have they been doing? If now we need someone who's only focused on that, as if getting a minister in the presidency, it does this. Every time there's a crisis in this country, we have a presidency that makes a super presidency. It was last year's riot. We then moved intelligence into the presidency. Now it's energy. Now we move a minister into the presidency. Next will be water and local government. Are we just going to build a super presidency whilst we've got a cabinet of people who are meant to be delivering on this job? I do not support the move. I think it bloats cabinet. It hollows out the capacity of the state. And more than anything, what we ought to be doing is actually holding people accountable, like the Minister of Energy, like the Minister of Public Enterprise, for the last number of years of failure in terms of load shedding.
Were there any other areas of concern that came through for you listening to the speech tonight?
Yeah, I thought the president was very thin on crime, which is, if you consider that over 67 people were murdered in this country last year, saying that you are going to add more police and use data is just insufficient. I must assert the fact that the president mentioned the plan, but I don't think he literally just touched on local government. And when it comes to the reticulation of energy and water, those are the biggest pain points for consumers. So I don't think the president did enough of a job of focusing on what happens at local government. And yes, we are after an election, but in truth, if you live in Johannesburg, you are without water, energy, a mayor who is without energy, and ultimately you are living in a place where municipal financing is going to cripple our economy. And if we don't deal with what happens at local government, we're going to face deeper crises. So I felt tonight the president could have been a lot more forthright, given the fact that municipalities are delivery points for energy. And when you come to ease of doing business, if you want to start a local business, it's your municipality that you are in contact with. It's those people who make sure the roads outside your door are working well and that you feel safe. So this is a fundamental issue of government. And then lastly, obviously, it's not for the president to announce a cabinet reshuffle at a State of the Nation address, but that will begin to tell us what capability there is in the state to be able to deliver, because the politics sometimes derail any plan that the president might have. So to me, I think over a long plan, we'll table 10 points, we'll make sure we've got a plan to show what we do on energy, how we build safe society. There was no mention on health and how we in fact make sure the government is efficient. Were areas that were missing for me.
He talked quite a bit in his speech about social compacts, social partners. I wonder, do you get a sense that there is an outreach to social partners and that other voices are being brought in and being heard?
This president has always reached out to other social partners. That we cannot, it's not his fault. But where the dilemma is that what is the genesis of a social compact? To me, the genesis begins with the fact that academia, civil society, everyone put their efforts and energy into drafting the National Development Plan as a guiding vision for what this country has to do, and it gathered dust and no one did anything about it. So where is the energy then to say, come back again, contribute to another plan that creates a social compact, and have a government that is not going to implement that? So to me, I'm not holding my breath in the belief that something will come of that. I think we'll have this, if you like, pay-as-you-go relationship between social partners. So when Labour needs an increase from government, you'll have an engagement there. And when business needs some form of regulation to be eased, you'll have an engagement there. But that there's a genuine consensus about a plan, I don't see that happening in the next year from this government. Because if you can't tell us, if you went to Kenya today, they'd be talking about Kenya 2030. If you went to China, they'd be talking about what China would look like in 2050. So the reality of it is that governments that are efficient have a long-term plan to which all stakeholders buy into it. Our government doesn't have that. And as a net consequence, you have the problem of not having a consensus amongst your stakeholders.
All right. If you were in Parliament next week for the debate on this address, what question would you ask him? What would be your most burning question?
What is the plan to recapacitate the state? My feeling is the president is a bit like a golfer who wants to play golf, but he's only got plastic clubs. We can all have good ideas, but if we don't have the capability to deliver against those, it's immaterial what the plan is. So are you going to make sure that the best are appointed? How do we make sure that happens? Are you going to make sure corruption is dealt with? How do we ensure that happens? And when we talk about even the use of partnerships, how do we ensure that happens with a capable government? If we fail at that exercise, trust me, and that's been the failure of the last number of years, and the 7th SONA was not short of ideas. I've heard them all before just about, other than the state of disaster and minister and the presidency. but the capability of delivery has been lacking, and the capability of the state is non-existent.
Mr. Mmusi Maimane, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks very, very much indeed for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us tonight.
Much appreciated.
All right, that's Mmusi Maimane, who's the leader of the Build One South Africa party, along with many other parties this evening, disappointed with what they've heard from the president, saying that we've heard it all before. Implementation, action is usually what follows these speeches. All right, you're watching The Globe. Stay with us.